All right, first things first, if you like my videos, please smash that like button.
Sign up for the STEP program. Yes, the link is below.
Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be going through more examples of the exam, the Computer Science AP exam, Computer Science AP Principles. Last week I went over all the guidelines, right? But this week we're gonna drill in a little bit more on specifically some of the examples. So this page right here is AP Computer Science Principles, the exam page. If you scroll down, you actually get some examples. So here are the examples. We're gonna go more in depth with example A because it got a perfect score, and we all want a perfect score. We've already seen the scoring guidelines last time, and we're going to look at the scoring commentary that they gave. So let's watch the video again. As you may recall, this was so what this program is doing is you can click on French or Spanish, right? And then if you press the button, it would say the word in French or Spanish. Let's continue watching it. All right, so there you go. That's the basic example of what this does. You can see here, like if you had nothing pressed, right? Nothing pressed and you press, I mean, nothing clicked, French or Spanish, and you click on one of these buttons, it tells you to select your language. Also, if you have them both clicked, it says select only one language, right? So this is the video example, and for the test, you will also have to provide a video example. Um, and then you have some written responses that you have to write out. So here are the written responses for this particular um, app, right? And then here are the different things that you have to answer, right? There's row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, row 5, and row 5. Okay. So it's a little bit confusing because this samples from 2020, and the way they are breaking it up now is in these rows. So it's like 5 answers. But here in the 2020 example, there's actually only 4 written responses from 3A, 3B, 3C, 3D. Nonetheless, all the answers are here. So let's just go through them so that you understand exactly the kind of detail that you'll need to provide and what your program needs to be doing. So if we go ahead and look at this first row, right? First, one of the most important things is that the program itself has to demonstrate an input, the program functionality, and output. So here in 3A, they say this program was created an MIT app Inventor to address the issue of learning new languages. Here it teaches the user how to say different colors, where the user inputs, and very important, you should 100% use this term, inputs, what language it wants to hear, either Spanish or French, and then taps on a color, prompting the program to output, other very important term, output the audio for certain colors. This allows the users to quickly learn how to say the colors in another language through interaction and output of audio. And now in this example, the person goes clearly to say what the video does and what it shows. In the video, it shows an example of how the user clicks on the Spanish checkbox and playing the audio for red and blue. The user can hear what it sounds like and thus learn how to say it correctly. If the user accidentally inputs no language or both, the program will catch the error and notify the user. So as you can see here, this is a very thorough explanation of the functionality, the program functionality, right? What it does, how is it doing it? How is it teaching people to learn a language? It tells you about the inputs, right? So the inputs are the user inputs in terms of clicking the button and deciding whether it's French or English or Czech. And the output is the audio of that color in that certain language, right? So it describes all of this. It takes care of everything from row one. And as you see here, right, you would not get awarded a point if the video does not show a demonstration of the program running. The video shows that the thing is running. The person explains it very well, all the functionality, input and output. Great. So now 3B. In this section, it's just showing two portions of the code, right? So here in row 2, it says to include 2 program code segments. One that shows how the data has been stored in a list or an array, depending on how you learn this. So you have to show how it's going to store the information in an array. And then the next one has to show how the data in this list, in the first list, is being used as part of fulfilling the program's purpose. So how does this program down here use the list above to be able to, fulfill the program's purpose or functionality that we discussed in the previous row? You also need to identify the name of the variable representing the list being used, right? And describe what data contained in this list is represented in the program. That is explained here in the text below. But let's take a look at this this array or this list, right? So this is an MIT App Inventor. It's, all programming languages are similar. So even though it's not Snap, we can break it down. But this is initializing a global audio. So that right there is the variable, right? We're initializing audio as a variable. And that variable is a list. So you're making a list, and that the list that you're making are the different colors. So black, red, green, pink, yellow, orange, blue, brown, white. Now, since this is making a list, right, each of these terms are going to be in a position of the list. Black would be in position 0 or 1, depending on how this program works. But typically in programming, the first item is item 0. So black would be item 0, red would be item 1, green would be item 2, pink would be item 3, and so forth until you reach the final the final term on this list, right? That would be the index value of this list, and it would correspond with the actual color. And that list is called audio. Here in button clicked, right? So this is a function that they created, that the user created. And then when it's the code here, so let's just go through the code and look at it, right? So we have an if-then statement, or if-then and if-else. So if French is checked and Spanish is checked, right? It's going to set output words. So it's going to set output to text, select only one language. So if we went back to the example, sorry guys, let me try to bring that up real quick, right? Here it is. If they're both clicked, which is select, right here, right? So if they're both clicked, right, the text it would show is select only one language. So that's what this part does right here. If they're both checked, French checked and Spanish checked, it's going to output the word select only one language, and then set sound one source to select language MP3. This while test I'm not sure why they're doing this. I guess this is when they're testing it, so I'm not too sure about that, but we could ignore that. else if, right? Else if French checked, meaning French is checked but Spanish is not checked, it outputs the word dot text to, and now this right here is actually an empty text, right? So it's not actually outputting any text. But what it is doing is setting the sound one to the source. And now what it's actually doing is creating the name of the audio file that it wants to get. So it's going to say get audio, global audio, right? Global audio, the index, so either index 1, 2, 3, right? .mp3, and then call sound one. So now so for example, this right here would be audio 1.mp3, and then it will call that sound one. So right, so we're setting sound one to the source that we just created with this algorithm. On the other hand, if Spanish is checked, it's not going to output anything to any words. There's not going to be any words, but it's going to set sound one to source, which is audio. Oops. So audio one Spanish.mp3, right? Or audio two Spanish.mp3. So in this case, the French words, right? That's just audio 1.mp3, audio 2.mp3, audio 3.mp3, audio 4.mp3. And in the Spanish ones, is doing audio 1 Spanish.mp3, audio 2 Spanish.mp3, audio 3 Spanish.mp3, and then it's calling that sound. So what it does is that it sets the term or the variable sound one. The source of that sound one is it's automatically creating the name of that file that it's going to call. It's not actually creating the file itself. The file is probably saved somewhere already in the app, right? But it uses this algorithm to be able to call that name. Else if French is not checked, right? And Spanish is not checked, it will output the word select your language, right? Okay. And then the test, like I said, I'm not sure what that does, what that says. So let's read what they say. The data contained in list audio is the list of available color names. Very important. It tells us the list, right? List of available color names. It represents all the colors a user can pick from the program in English. These are used to create corresponding Spanish or French audio files based on the language selected. When the button is pressed, it will get the English color word from the index of the color in the list. Here, the language and the user has chosen does not matter. The program will then create the audio file name for the Spanish or French audio and on what language the user has checkmarked by manipulating the text. For example, adding Spanish to the end if they selected Spanish, and then adding MP3 to the end in order to call the correct audio file. For the program to function without lists, in general, each button will have to call individual audio files, meaning we would need to have buttons for every color and language combination, making the code and the user interface more complex. Okay, so this starts answering another question further down, right? And I'll get to that in a second. This part is another part of the rubric. But like I was explaining before, what this is doing is that it's using an algorithm to create the file name that needs to be called when it says call sound one, right? Because we're setting sound one based on this small algorithm right here, right? Which is audio number or audio index.mp3, audio number.mp3, or audio number Spanish.mp3. Okay, great. So that's what it says over here. And if we look at our rubric, identifies the name and the variable represented being used in the response. Yes, we said the variable is, well, there's a couple variables, right? There is, in this case, sound one, right, is a variable that you're using. And that's what's being altered right here. Describes the data contained in a list, and in this list is represented in the program, like how you're using the data in the program. Okay. And the written response includes a program segment and shows a list being used to manage complexity of the program. So how does this make the program less complex? So how do you deal with the complexity? Explains how the named selected list manages complexity in the program by explaining why the program could be written or how it would be written differently without a list. So that's what this last sentence is. For the program to function without a list in general, each button will have to call the individual audio file. So if we were to look at this, if the program had individual audio files for each button, right, that means you would have to have two black buttons. You have to have a French black button and a Spanish black button. You have to have a French red button and a a Spanish red button, and so forth. So there would have to be a button for each color and language. So you would, instead of having 9 buttons, you would actually have 18 buttons. So this application deals with complexity by creating these check marks for picking a language, as opposed to creating 2 buttons, one for French and one for Spanish. So that's how this program is dealing with the complexity, and it says that, right? So it's very specifically says, you know, we would need to have buttons for every color and language combination, making the code and user face more complex. So that explains exactly why this is a better way to run the program using lists and using this algorithmic way of creating the file name that's called to export that sound file. So there you go. So the next part, 3C, let's see, include. So here in row 4, it says include 2 program code segments, one showing a student developed procedure with at least one parameter that has the effect on the functionality of the procedure, one showing where the student developed procedure is being called. Okay, so we have to show both of these. So in here, this is an example call to the button click procedure. There's a call for each button. Okay, so this is button click procedure, right? This is the button click procedure. So this is one of the student procedures. And then here, this is, okay, so then this is a more specific one. This is the green button clicked, right? When green button is clicked, you're calling the button clicked with index 3, right? So this index 3, and so that's going to fit right in. So when you press the green button, it's going to call button clicked, which is up here, and it's going to use index 3, which means anywhere it says index, so get index is going to get that index from here, from this code, and input it into this code to be able to give us the full file name that we need. Okay, let's read through this procedure. This procedure helps to contribute to the overall functionality of the program by selecting the correct audio file based on what language and color the user has selected. Since this algorithm is needed every time a user presses the button, the procedure helps the overall efficiency of the program by having the code located in one location that the program repeatedly calls on. So this is important right here. This is the algorithmic explanation. So this is one algorithm that's called over and over and over. It doesn't matter if green button's clicked, red button, whatever it is, this is the code it's running. The only thing it's different is the color of the button that's being clicked and the index. And that index gets pushed in to this other code. And that's the algorithm. And it makes it less complex because You have this one thing running over and over, and you don't have to make this for each and every button. When a user presses a certain color button, the button returns an index pertaining to the main audio list of colors. The procedure takes the index of the color of the parameter and selects the respective list element, which is a string that contains a certain color. Then, depending on the language, the procedure will append a language identifier, for example, Spanish, and then add MP3. It will then use this to call a certain color from the database audio files that's named accordingly. The procedure is able to take parameters and inputs from the user and then output them by constructing certain audio files names and pulling them into the database to play. This action demonstrates selection, so this is another important term, demonstrates selection, sequencing, and is when the procedure is able to take the task accordingly to call from the list. Selection and sequencing is going to be an important term to use, right? And I think that's in the next row. Iteration is used when the process senses that there is no languages or both languages selected and thus repeats the audio of selected language until the user does so. So those are important aspects of it. And then here in row 5, right, here in row 5 is where they explicitly ask for include program code segments of a student developed algorithm that includes sequencing, selection, and iteration, and explain in detail steps and identify the algorithm works in enough detail that someone can recreate it. So you have to demonstrate the selection, right, and the sequencing. So, and here, the selection, right? This is the selection. You're selecting the button and putting an index. And then the sequencing is the sequence of steps. So these are the sequence of steps that are using. And then the selection, which is index 3 or index 2, index 1, and then inputting those values in. And then the iteration, right? This is iterating several times depending on the button that's clicked. So there's going to be a green French iteration, there's going to be a Spanish green iteration, and so forth for each button that's clicked. So that is explained very well through this example. And then finally, the test cases are based on the conditions of what language is selected and what button for the color is pressed, which represents by the parameter index, right? That's the parameter. So the parameter index, this is from the previous here, at least one parameter and procedure. So these are the terms we need to use. Parameter index. We would want to check the program for both Spanish and French. For the language Spanish, we could select one of the colors, for example, orange, and the program should give us the correct translation for Spanish. For the language French, we could select one of the colors, for example, orange, and the program will give us the correct translation for French. To further test the program, we should select another color, for example, green, and the program should give us the correct translation. Each of these test cases executes different parts of the algorithm by going into the condition of the checkboxes are checked for each language. So this is really just explaining the parameter index, right? And how the index is used in order to complete the algorithm. And like we said before, the index 3 gets plugged in to this algorithm here that was created, right? And it uses that index here, uses that index to produce the audio file name, which is then played or called and then played. So this has all the aspects that they asked from all 5 of these rows, right? Each of these rows is completed. So when you answer the questions in your test, you're actually going to have to answer them for row 1, row 2, row 3. So it's a little confusing here because of 3A, 3B, and it's a little bit different than how they're going to be asking you in your test. But you're going to need all that specificity and be sure that you're using these terms. And that's all. See you next week with another example. Bye.